really lovely to have you here. I'm not quite sure if I'm actually excited. No, I know why I'm excited. This is my absolute mob squad, honestly. So it is also the last session. So last night, for those of you who weren't at the, well, I don't think any of you were at the official opening. Well, Mrs. Splenski was, but and so last night we actually had a panel discussion that was 3 weary middle-aged men, and they were all called John, and we actually did it on purpose because I knew that we were going to finish with 4 of the most inspiring, wonderful, level-headed, intelligent, beautiful blondes in my life. Jacinta Tynan, whom I was at school with and have loved to pieces since I was 12. So Jacinta Tynan, would you like to head up? I've only just got my introductions together. Sorry, Chris and Mackey, I'm getting better at this. Maybe I want the microphone. So Jo Capp, with whom I have spent more time on email as we wrote a bio, as Jo wrote her bio together, which we know. Sue Mackey and I did a POS Ed course together with Charlie Scudamore, the first one as parents. And Sue and I have an identical personality. So that's my twin sister. Look out, world. And Alyssa Azar, who sensibly climbs mountains in her waking hours and is joining us for a very, very rare public appearance because she would prefer to be on the side of a mountain climbing Everest than in public with us today. So be kind. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a really exciting thing. The day has been an inordinately huge success. We have loved having you here all day. And as the last session, these 4 incredible women have all got books that they have written. And it is Christmas in 10 weeks. So in 70 days, my Christmas tree's up. How are you going? No, you're not trying. You're not trying. But I really do urge you to take the opportunity because you can have the books signed, gift them, and enjoy their company for a little bit longer because you'll certainly enjoy them now. Thank you.
So I have this great introduction here planned, and then I realised that you all know these people. Well, some of them. So I won't go on forever. But one of our speakers has climbed Mount Everest. Guess which one? And the other 2... Oh, have you as well? Sorry. Have you as well? Well, I mean, no. I shouldn't make assumptions. The other 2 probably feel like they have. Yeah. It's the same thing. They've all faced... The reason we're all here is they've all faced huge... seemingly insurmountable obstacles in their lives. They've stared fear in the face, and by taking one step at a time, you've all pulled through, better off than they were before, and that's what we're going to talk about. So Jo-Ann Capp is the one I think most of you know here. Her fan club is here, and she's the author of 4 Hot Chips, which of course she wrote after her then 5-year-old son Reed was diagnosed with leg cancer, a tumour, and the book chronicles the story of the impact on her family, her marriage, which she's very candid about, but they're still standing, spoiler alert, and her life has changed forever, for the better, she says. Sue Mackey is a former intensive care nurse with a certificate in positive psychology. She runs a thriving psychology practice with her husband in Geelong, who's also been, there he is, chairing a wonderful session today. And after being diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer in 2013, 5 months of chemotherapy, a mastectomy, radiotherapy and reconstructive surgery, she wrote Positive Oncology, and it is a wonderful book. It's an optimistic approach to the big C. And as she says, Sue said to me, it's the book that you really don't want anyone to have, but if they go through this, it's a guidebook, really. And Alyssa Azar, another Toowoomba local, she's an adventurer, of course, the youngest person in the world to trek the Kokoda Track at age 8. Mm-hmm. I have an 8-year-old. I can't get him out the front door, so it's extraordinary. And at 12, she climbed the 10 highest peaks in Australia, and the youngest Australian to climb Mount Everest, her 3rd attempt at 19. And she's not done yet. It's not over yet. So, Jo, I wanted to start with you. What you've been through, of course, was incredibly frightening and harrowing, and you wouldn't wish it upon anybody. You say now that you wouldn't wish that experience on anybody, but you would wish that perspective on people.
Yes, Jacinta. I mean, obviously, what I've been through, and if you were to marry it up to a number of different things that people have been through, I think we all come out of it with some sort of richness. Well, people who are positive, like us, do actually take the negative side of things and try to flip it. I do believe that I wouldn't wish a sick child on anybody. Any form of illness of your child is probably the most harrowing, horrible thing that you have to be confronted with, and being told that they have cancer and may not survive is really something that none of you, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. However, the perspective that I have now on my life and my children's lives and my husband's life and my life particularly is huge. That perspective I wish on my very best friends.
You talk about a similar perspective, Sue. You use the term post-traumatic growth. I love that. What wisdom have you gained through that cancer experience?
Well, I think it's a gradual wisdom, although you wake up, one day and then the next day your life has just changed, completely. So you're going in a different direction. So you pretty much drop your bundle for a while. I think most people do, and that's normal. And then you have to sort of pick yourself up and find a way. You can't help the hand that you've been dealt, but you can work out how to play the hand. So I think that's what I did, and it wasn't instant, and there were many, many dark moments, and I think everyone goes to that point. But yeah, I can honestly say that my perspective has changed. I appreciate things a lot more these days, and life is better.
So this is I just wanted to hear from all of you briefly, and we'll get into some more topics later. So Alyssa, just so that everybody can hear a bit from you as well, we can't all climb Mount Everest. We're not going to. I mean, okay, we can, but we won't. All right, we'll be honest about that. So give us a quick snapshot. What lessons can you just pass on so that we don't have to do it, that you've learned through these experiences?
Yeah, God, I've learnt so much. I mean, an Everest expedition alone, you're living on the mountain for 2 months and so much goes on. But even the process of training for it and preparing for it was pretty much a constant growth process, which I loved as well. But I think the biggest lesson for me, the confidence that you take away from that and the perspective shift that you have because of an experience like that is probably the biggest thing I took away from it.
Thank you. Thank you to you all. So just a little chance for you to hear from everyone. I wanted to talk about facing our greatest fears, because you've all done that. And a lot of us don't actually, if we're calling it an opportunity, we don't get that opportunity to stare it in the face. Jo, you said that when your doctor first told you Reid had cancer, when that diagnosis came through, you actually blanked out because you were staring fear in the face. What was your worst fear in that moment?
Oh, well, obviously the worst fear was that he was going to die and we were going to lose our 5-year-old little boy. So when you are told something like that, you instantly think, oh, it's cancer, everyone's going to die. But since then, I've actually, on a positive side of things, cancer is not a death sentence. Cancer is something that we all have to live with, and whether we are diagnosed ourselves or someone in our family is diagnosed, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're staring at death in the face. However, at that point in time, that's what I was looking at. And I zoned out because I had David beside me and I thought he would listen, but he zoned out too. So
there it is, told you.
So we both sort of were very, and then I think the next line in the book I actually said, David asked, is it going to kill him? Could it kill him? And yes, we were answered with a nod. So yeah, it was pretty harrowing.
And you, of course, didn't know that you'd be in this place that you're in now. You can never know the future, so it's one step at a time. And Sue, you faced the fear of your own death. You stared death in the face as well. You quote in your book Nelson Mandela. There's lots of wonderful quotes in this book, Positive Oncology. You've drawn together some really great thought leaders. And Nelson Mandela's quote, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Do you believe that courage can be cultivated? Is it something that we can all find within ourselves?
Yes, I actually do. I think courage is something that maybe at times in life you have to dig really deep for. You mightn't think that you have as much as you do, but there actually is a reservoir there you can draw on. So I think it's a bit like, well, a muscle. You can exercise. You can learn some strategies to build on your courage. And I think that reducing the fear is a really big part of that. So because when you have cancer, or when a loved one has cancer, it's the fear that gets you. And a lovely friend of mine who had cancer and didn't survive it, who dealt with that really, really well, said to me, Sue, deal with the fear, and just remember it's false expectations appearing real. So you can get ahead of yourself and worry about, oh my gosh, I'll be dead next week. And so it's a matter of having strategies to harness that fear, and that will help you with your courage, I think.
And Alyssa, you're described as fearless, which you are, I think. You talk about how you actually do mind training, and you write little motivational quotes to yourself and so on. So it sounds like you are training yourself to be fearless.
Yeah, well, I think, going into some of the expeditions that I have, there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of unpredictable things, and so you're more training your mind to get used to that and being ready to, I guess, react to possibly the worst case scenarios that could happen on the mountain. And being able to control fear, particularly on Everest, is huge. With avalanche risk, you don't know what's going to happen at the higher altitudes, and so being able to control that is a big part of the success on the mountain.
Yeah, I have to say, when I was reading your book, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I cannot imagine what that's like. We'll hear more about that as we go on. Obviously, we're here today at the last session, can you believe it? But to talk about, we wanted to talk about the impact on mental health. That's the point of today. So let's talk about that and how the things you've been through have impacted you. Jo, if we can start with you. We think as parents that we can make everything okay for our children. We think that every problem they've got, we can get through it, especially when they're young. It must have been you must have felt so powerless to realise that there's nothing you could do in this moment. You tried hard to put a positive spin on things for Reid, and that was really moving. I recall one stage in the book where he was looking at his, what do you call the brace on his leg, and you said, it's like a...
Azar frame, yeah.
Right, Azar frame, and you said it looks like a transformer. Yeah. You're always trying to put this positive spin on it. But that's a huge weight of responsibility on you to be constantly buoying up someone else and buoying up your family. You were constantly lifting everybody else up. What kind of a toll did that take on your mental health, which you probably didn't even let yourself recognise at the time?
No, I didn't recognise it till towards the end, when I actually had a fairly large meltdown one day and abused everybody. For no reason, just was really angry, so decided to take it on the people. I think
there was a reason.
There were people very close to me that I knew could handle it. I think it was very important for me to surround myself with my mum and my daughter and my sister and her husband and my husband. And and when I exploded, and my dad, when I exploded, they just sort of looked at me and just let me explode. Then I realised, that I was not well. A couple of months passed on, and Reid then went into a remission side of things, and that's when I really recognised that I wasn't well. It was almost like I'd kept up this brave face for so long, and holding it all together for everybody, and then as soon as he was well, I then became very sick. And you hear about that quite regularly, especially with carers of people with cancer, and it came out in my skin. I was covered in a very bad rash. I lost 2/3 of my hair. I basically then had to go on lots of drugs and things, and then I actually realised, once all of that happened to me, all of the physical sides of things, that what was causing this was actually internal. It was my mental health that was causing this illness, so that's when I finally gave it up and went and got some help.
It took you a while though. when I was reading the book, 4 Hot Chips, I kept reading it thinking, when's she going to get some counselling? When's she going to see a psychologist? Where's that bit happening? I couldn't believe it. It took you so long. Now, what was that about? I mean, when you first were offered a social worker, you said no, and then it was only when you say the wheels fell off that you decided to get some help. Why didn't you do it sooner? What was stopping you?
I think, Jacinta, there's been a lot of talk today about the stigma that that surrounds mental health, and that was 10, 15, oh gosh, how many, 13 years ago now, and it was a lot stronger then. That stigma is a lot less now, and if it happened to me today, of course, knowing what I know now and all those things, hindsight's a wonderful thing, I would probably seek help, and I would encourage anybody to seek help sooner than I did. So that was number one. I felt, no, I'm fine. I'm a strong girl from the bush. I've got this wonderful family around me. I'll be fine. I don't need any counselling or any help. So, and then eventually I realised that if I didn't get some help, I was going to lose everything.
And did it help you?
It did. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
What didn't you like about it?
So before Reid was diagnosed, I was a vibrant, happy-go-lucky, quite loud sort of person. Went to all the parties. Yeah, was one of those sorts of people in everybody's faces. And then when Reid was unwell, I became a lot more centred and very much held everything very close. Didn't really want to go to things. And I then, when I got the counselling and I went to the counsellor, she actually said, you may not ever be that person again, and that is okay. But I couldn't be okay with that. I was, no, that's who I am. That's how I've grown up. That's the person I've been my whole life. I was school captain at school and debating and interact and organised the formal and did all those things when I was growing up. Why can't I be like that for the rest of my life? But it did. It had. It changed the whole structure. I have to say that I'm back to very close to that person again now, but it has taken quite a long time.
Yeah, you call it BC and after AC, but
yes.
Before cancer, after cancer.
BC and AC, yeah.
So obviously you know very much firsthand about how that can happen, the change in people when they're diagnosed with cancer. You quote a statistic that 40% of people with cancer get depression. I was really struck by that. It's such a high statistic. What are the other 60% doing differently that they're not getting depressed by these diagnoses?
Well, there's probably a whole variety of factors. It's pretty much 40% of people with chronic illness become depressed. So it's so common, and anxiety's enormous in cancer because you're just anxious about everything. Your body's failed you. So what are the other 60% doing? I can speak for myself. I think I had a very lucky pre-season training. So I was fit, I was married to a psychologist, I managed a psychology practice, so I was working with psychology every day, and I was optimistic. That was my factory setting. I think I was really lucky in that regard. And I was a bit of a positive psychology junkie before I got cancer. So once I got it and I sort of fell off my perch, fell in a heap and picked myself up off the floor, I thought, well, what strategies have I got that I could maybe pull in to save myself from, demise of the mind. Yeah.
And what about you, Alyssa? You're obviously an incredibly strong young woman. Have you had moments when you felt the wheels fell off and felt like you weren't coping?
Yeah, look, definitely. I think there's always, after you get back from a particularly big climb, but then also the climbs that haven't succeeded, and not just that, but natural disasters and a lot of the deaths that had happened on various mountains. That's very hard to sort of process once you get back. And I do think that the mental strength that it takes to climb, that sort of ends up applying to your life. Like you were saying, you sort of have these strategies to then lean back on and go, okay, well, this is an obstacle, not on a mountain, but now in my day-to-day life that you can sort of fall back on a little bit. Yeah.
And it takes the courage again to recognise that things aren't always going swimmingly. But it sounds like you do a lot of picking yourself up rather than going and seeking help.
Yeah, my family I'm very close with, particularly my dad, so I know that I have got someone there if I need to sort of talk to anyone, and we're very open with each other, so that's been great. But it's always sort of been more of an internal thing as well.
One of the things you all have in common, there's quite a lot actually, but is that you've all grown from your struggles and your adversity, the lessons that are in adversity. So there are great gifts in that. So I wanted to ask you about that. So Alyssa, your struggles seem to actually, when you've come across, and you come across the actual physical struggles on the mountain of the climate and earthquakes and all of the things you encounter, is with you, it seems to actually spur you on. I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, I think so. When I set the goal of specifically wanting to climb Everest, I knew it was a few years away, and particularly being so young, I think that's almost, it puts a bit of a spotlight on you. So I knew straight away that I had to be really committed to it, and I wanted to go in 100%, and, you know, however long it took is however long it took, and everything between was just something to either be overcome or an obstacle or something to learn from. So I kind of viewed it all as a process, even the hardest times.
You've definitely, Jo, grown through adversity, haven't you? And that goes without saying. You were talking about that before, and you're not the person that you were before.
I just realised that I actually didn't want to be the different person anymore. I wanted to make a difference. So by gaining the knowledge or, you know, the experience that I've been through, if I could actually make a difference sharing that, that's what I've gained. Really, that's been my drive for the last 10 years.
I think it strikes me reading all your stories that we need to suffer to grow. And people who tend to coast, I mean, no one really coasts, do they? But people who think they do, they're not getting that growth. It's when we look back at the tough times that we've been able to become that person that has more meaning in their life or more presence and making a difference in their lives. Sue, you quote the first noble truth of Buddhism in the book, which is to live is to suffer. Why do we need to suffer to have lessons? What is the growth in suffering?
Well, it'd be great if we didn't, but I just think it's a normal part of life. And life is about ups and downs, and generally most people in their lifetime will maybe not have a major suffering, but have adversity. So for me, it's normal, and it's something I think maybe, and Mia was talking in the last session about, you know, what we've done to our generation of children, and we've tried to prevent them from suffering or failing or feeling bad. So I tend to think that, you know, now it's a good thing to be able to just look at, okay, at some point in time, there's going to be a big challenge, tragedy, or some suffering. So what sort of skills do I equip myself with for when that comes up? I just accept it.
Because that's the thing, most of us don't do any of that prep work, do we? And then tragedy strikes and we're stuffed. We don't know what to do. So it's that a way of trying to understand that we need to get those tools now and learn those lessons now so that we're ready for it when the time comes.
That's where positive psychology is a fabulous avenue to be able to, because people think, oh, you know, it's all about happiness or being happy or whatever. Well, it's actually not. It's about becoming resilient and developing skills and having a toolkit for when times get tough. So there's some great things to be gained from positive psychology.
But how do we inspire people to go and get that help before they need it?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? They're doing a lot in schools now, like we heard Charlie Scudamore here earlier. I'm involved in positive education. I'm on an advisory board for the Institute. I really believe in educating the children. I believe in educating preschoolers on giving them skills for resilience.
I wanted to also talk about that mind-body-spirit connection and seeing whether you think there is one because of what you've been through. So the Western philosophy very much is it's when you are diagnosed, if we're talking about cancer, first of all, that it's the Western philosophy is that it's random physical disease, nothing you can do about it. The Eastern philosophy is that there's an emotional, physical connection. The medical profession seems to be moving towards that now and embracing that idea of that connection. Where is that at, would you say? And do you think it's important that we acknowledge that connection, Sue?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Mind and body are inextricably linked. So, you know, if you have a trauma, you'll probably get some physical symptoms coming up down the track. If sometimes a lot of physical conditions come out of emotional conditions. So
my hair just gets curlier.
Yeah. Well, that's a positive. So I think just so linked, and the Eastern traditions have known for thousands of years, and suddenly Western medicine popped up, and we kind of ignored that side of things. So I think there's a lot of hope with combining the two, and I think that the medical profession are getting there. Like, we're getting there. I worked as a nurse, so I was trained straight down the line, just the body. Okay, the mind didn't really come into it a whole lot, but I think that was last century, so I think this century we're starting to turn it around.
Jo, I imagine it's harder when you're dealing with a sick child to see that connection. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I do believe. One thing that I do believe in is with children with given a diagnosis, and when they're actually told that they're going to take all this medicine and get better, they believe it. So their mind, because they don't understand what it is that they're actually going through, I do believe that the work that some of the social workers did with Reid and the occupational therapists did in the hospitals was concentrating on his cancer as being a baddie, and the medicine was going to get rid of the baddie. So he just believed it. He knew it was going to happen. He wasn't given great odds when he was diagnosed, but he didn't know those odds. We didn't share any
You
of that.
deliberately kept that from him?
We didn't tell. We just said that he was very sick and he needed to take the medicine that we were going to give him, even though it made him so sick, so incredibly sick that, and I don't know, most of you in this room have read my book, but there were times when he was so unwell that I actually used an analogy of a mountain where I stripped him down to his bare singlet. He didn't even have underclothes on, just a singlet, and I take him to the top of a mountain and I'm literally dangling him over the edge, just hanging onto that cotton singlet. So I use a mountain almost as my Everest, as, okay, well, if you don't take this medicine, there's nothing left. I've got nothing left. So my belief was that we didn't need to tell him that he was dying or that he had a disease that could potentially kill him. We just told him he had to take the medicine to get better. And he did. He's now playing A-grade basketball. He's 17, so...
If only you could have seen this day. But then you wouldn't be the person that you are.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Round of applause for that. Well, that's it. If you'd been able to see what was going to happen, would you have done that growth? Or you just go, all right, we'll just sit back then and let this turn up. Alyssa, I imagine you're in no doubt about that mind-body connection. When you're out on the mountain and it's just you and you're doing all that mind training.
We often get asked, what percentage of it is mental and what percentage is physical. And I do think when it comes together, to work together, that's when I've definitely felt my best on a mountain. And I definitely think, particularly as you start to get higher and higher, you just sort of feel like it all merges into one, for sure.
What is that feeling like? When you got to first of all, Kokoda Track and then Everest, what goes through your mind?
Well, I think, there's a lot of sort of delayed gratification getting there. So it's a bit surreal, a moment that you've imagined for a long time and then it's literally in front of you. So in a way, obviously you expect it because you work so hard for it. But yeah, it's just surreal to actually be there. It's a very sort of dreamlike moment.
Wow. Did you let yourself absorb that moment and just be present for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly getting to the summit of Everest, just totally wanted to be in the moment and take it all in.
Get that selfie?
Yes. Before I went down and got the selfie.
All of you have chosen to write your story to some degree. I'm interested to know why, because there must have been a motivation behind it. So Jo, very brave what you did, because you really went there and shared what was going on for you and your family. Did you find it cathartic and did your writing help you make sense of it as you went along? And also, I'm asking triple questions, which is the first rule of journalism not to do, but somewhere in there also tell us, did you write for yourself or for others?
At the time, I wrote for myself. So the very first week that Reid was diagnosed, my sister, my whole family rallied around, and my sister sent me a journal, just an empty book, and she sent it to me and she said, I don't know what to do, just write everything down. And I thought, okay, well, that sounds good. So I actually did. Every day I'd write something in it. There are pages in this diary where I've just got big scribbles and the word fuck right across the double page. But it helped to put it down and actually face the fear that I had. So I wrote it for myself to start with. Then it was back when the flip phones were happening. And we send a text message, it takes a really long time. You know, you press one thing 3 times, oh, I missed it, go round again, you know how that was. So I would send a group text to all of my friends, and I think I had around 100 people on that text list, and I would send them a text every now and again telling them where we were up to. And then I thought, oh, this is too hard. And then the Wonder Factory, which was a children's area of the hospital, had a computer in it because we didn't have laptops. It was, you know, they were just coming in, but it was a big thing to have a laptop. So you could go down to the Wonder Factory and you could use the computer. So I started a blog, and I called the blog, I've forgotten what I called the blog, but anyway, I called the blog something about Reed's journey or something like that, and Reed's progress, thanks Alex. And I sent the blog, then the link to the blog to everyone that I had on that list with my texting, and Emma picked up the blog and she loved the blog and she said, you need to turn this into a book. So the next thing is the movie deal.
Who's playing you?
Well, I have been told that Asher Keddy should play me and that Chris Hemsworth can play David, but if Chris Hemsworth's playing David, I'm playing me.
All right, you heard it here first. Sue, it seems like your book was very much written for others. It's like a gift, your book, and everyone who goes through cancer should have a copy. Was that your intention?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, when I first was diagnosed, I did set out to write a book. So what you find when you're diagnosed with cancer is that your friends and your family are just devastated, understandably. And so you're sort of in this space where you're managing, you know, how you tell people, and it's just, you know, people are crying inconsolably and all that. So having been a nurse, I've had a pretty good dose of black humour, so I turned it into a bit of a stand-up comedy routine, which some of my friends thought was hilarious and a couple just couldn't deal with. So, and one friend said to me, why don't you write a book about the funny things that happen? And it was so amazing. That was like the first week or so. And from that point on, I said, yeah, okay, I'll write a book. And I had a name for it. It was called A Lighter Shade of Pink. And so most days I would look for the funny things. And that book didn't ever get written. I got to the end of it. No. Well, I got to the end of my treatment. It was like, you know, a year down the track, and I just went, I just want to get so far away from cancer that how do people ever write a book about it? Because it keeps you in that space. So, and then I Googled all funny books about cancer, and I read all of those, and they weren't very funny. And then I read what I'd written, and I thought, oh, it doesn't actually seem very funny. So I thought it was a bit of a flop. So then I went off to do my rehab, and I did a course in positive psychology, and it sort of, the book, and that was to get away from cancer and to rehabilitate me with the science of happiness and well-being. And at the end of that, we had to write a little assignment on what we'd learnt from the course and put that towards something. And I came up with the idea of, well, I'd use the strategies myself, so why don't I expand upon that? And it actually was a brochure. It was a pamphlet, my book, and it's still just a bit bigger than that. It doesn't take long to read. It's very quick, large font pictures, because it has to be 80 pages to qualify as a book. So that's how it, sorry, long story, but that's how it came up. But the writing of the funny things was therapeutic for me. So what that did was it changed my perspective every day. Instead of looking for the tragedy, which is what you tend to look for and experience, I was on the hunt for funny things. So
can you just tell us one of the funny things? Do you remember any of them?
See, this is so hilarious, because even when people ask me this, and I've been interviewed quite a few times, it's like, oh my God, what was a funny thing? And it was like, I can't come up with a funny thing, but there were so many. And well, you know, and some of them were kind of funny / tragic things. Like I hadn't told our youngest daughter and that I had cancer, and I told her I had a headache for a couple of days, but I was actually crying in my room, and came down, and I thought, I've got to get up and get her to school. And I came down, and here she was in the bathroom saying, Mum, do you know how to tie a bandana on your head? And I've just gone, oh my God. But she said, she said, why? What's wrong? She said, it's National Bandana Day today. I need to wear one to school. And I went, oh, of course, yeah, we'll just tie the ends of it. But that was actually quite funny in retrospect.
You saw the humour in that? Okay.
Not at the time.
Moving me. But I think the point of that is that you writing the funny stories was helpful for you at the time. So maybe that's all it was meant to be.
Yeah.
To get you through. Alyssa, you told your story to Sue Williams, journalist
Yes.
Sue Williams. Why did you agree to go through that and to get that story down? Why do you think it's important that we hear your story, read your story?
I think, a lot of these sort of challenges of mine have been very personal journeys. But at the same time, certainly my parents always encouraged me to share it where I could, because you just don't know where other people are going to find inspiration in that. And so originally it was just, sort of me documenting personally, the preparation for Everest and all of that. And then, this sort of book deal came along, and thought about it for a while and said yes. And it was quite real because it was happening in real time. I'd get back from a climb that had failed massively because of natural disaster, and we'd have to sit down and sort of chat about it. So, it was pretty raw. But I was happy with it by the time that, so it came out.
Because you're in the thick of it and living your own life, it's always hard to look from above and see what we see. Do you see that your journey to now is inspiring to others?
Sometimes, but not entirely. I guess for me, it's always just kind of been the norm, because I did start this so young. I'm quite used to that process. But I think if it can, obviously, I want to.
With everything you've been through, the three of you, it's not just a solo journey, impacting very much the people around you and your family. So I wanted to talk about the impact on families and the toll it takes when we go through adversity. Jo, I've flagged this already, but if we can start with you, you're very candid in the book about the toll on your marriage of Reed's illness. You're living apart a lot of the time by necessity, because Reed was in hospital in Brisbane quite a bit, so you were there with him.
Yes.
And the stats are against you. So 2 out of 3 marriages break up when a child is sick. You quote that statistic. And you're very honest about your anger at your husband. So I just wrote a couple of notes of some of the things you said in there. You said he's throwing his weight around, one of them. Yeah, and you're used to being the one in control. You mentioned that you dealt with the things very differently. David slept to block everything out, and you couldn't sleep because you were so angst-ridden. You said the blues we endured were not for the faint-hearted, cracks and holes in our marriage, and even the seemingly inevitable demise of our marriage. So as I was reading it, I was like, well, they didn't make it. Spoiler alert, here you are. So why did you decide, especially as how it ended up, to include all this in there? Because you could have airbrushed that. That's a lot of very personal information. It was courageous of you to put it in. Why did you decide it needed to be in there?
When you first said this to me a couple of days ago, and I have spoken to some friends since then, because I have sold a lot of books, which has been fabulous, thanks to Emma and her wonderful publishing company, but most of them have been sold to my friends. So there is no spoiler alert. So they all actually know that I was still married, so it wasn't really... But when you said it to me, she said that you actually were expecting it. You were expecting it by the way that I wrote, that at the end there was no Jo and David. That's exactly... When I thought about it more, it was exactly the message I wanted to put across, was the fact that I learned to actually, and I do put this at the end of the book too, that it's okay for everybody to deal with things differently. At the time when we were going through all of this, I hated how different he was to the way he was treating me, how he was treating himself, how he was treating his, everything basically. It was wrong because it was so different to the way that I was dealing with it. And I was right. That's how I saw it. But in actual fact, what made his way of dealing with it any wronger or righter than the way I was? So I actually came to terms with, and the counsellor helped me do that, in the sense that I actually came to accept the fact that just because he fell asleep when Reed was having major lung surgery and he lost a third of his lung and I wanted to stab him in the eye with a fork, was literally, that was how he could deal with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. So many people, when I give that analogy and people actually go, oh, hang on, that would be me. I'd be the one that want to go to sleep and my husband would be the one pacing the floors. I mean, that's the thing. We're all different and there's no wrong or right way of dealing with adversity, and you write about it in your book, with the fact that we all deal with it differently and there is just no wrong or right way. And we have to actually sometimes take stock, and we have to take time, and we have to take time out from one another to actually appreciate we are different human beings and we're going to deal with things differently. So.
And I think the other great gift in you, including all of that in your story, and for anyone that writes memoir, is that that's life. And it gets people, the gift of what all of you have done is that when people read other people's stories and see what they've been through, we see ourselves in those stories and we feel connected and we feel like it's not just me, I'm not alone. And so I was going to ask you, Sue, how important is it that we are honest about not just marriage problems, but the impact on families? How important is it that we're honest about that it is tough?
Yeah.
Anything we go through.
Oh, absolutely. And the hardest thing you'll ever do is tell your family that you've got cancer. It's like just, you just, that's the overwhelming thing, I think. And you see the impact that it has on your family, like everyone dealt with it differently, that's for sure. Chris, I was so lucky, Chris being a clinical psychologist was amazing. He would hypnotise me to sleep in the middle of the night. So, that was like, how lucky was I? But, the kids all dealt with it differently. I think one of our best times was sitting around the dinner table and with our youngest who, she just sort of came out, she was in year 9 at the time, I think, year 8 at the time. And she said, Mum, having cancer doesn't really make that much difference. And I was like, yes, that's fantastic. That was like music to my ears. And so that was amazing. But everyone was different. Our son was away living interstate at uni and his best friend suicided around a similar time. And Mum had cancer, so he fell off his perch. But that was like a perfect storm of things. And everyone's different, I think. Yeah.
So you've also had your own family struggles as well. Your parents divorced, and that's in the story. I wanted to ask you the impact it had on you, but also why did you think it was important to include those details in there for people to see everything that had shaped you?
Yeah, look, I think it was important because obviously the story is about the climbing, but I think a lot of the sort of personal struggles you go through as well are very much relevant to it. And I think people can relate to that, as you were saying. There's quite a connection there. And it actually happened sort of right on the cusp of me deciding to go for Everest. There was quite a sort of divide in my family between sort of my dad and myself really wanting to sort of branch out, and we both had some pretty big goals we wanted to chase, and then the other side of my family were kind of the opposite. And so it was kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. Obviously our family had split up and that was quite a challenging time, but that's when I also felt the freedom to really go, okay, now I'm going to pursue this thing I really want to do. So
did it actually, chicken or the egg, I guess, but did your parents splitting up drive you further to want to achieve more?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. So we actually, I think right after I'd climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my dad, it was right after we got back, but it'd sort of been a few months coming. We sort of knew that was going to come, but then we'd moved out and the split had happened. And yeah, I think that then drove me to go, I'm not going to wait or hold it back. It just felt like the right time because of that, and kind of a new chapter to go and do it.
It's not just, for all of us, it's not just family, is it? We're a part of a community, and I think in a city like Toowoomba, there is that really lovely community spirit that you see. You certainly didn't do this alone. You had a really big backing of friends and community.
Yeah, absolutely. It was sort of a few-year process, and when I started out, I wasn't really within the climbing community, but certainly growing up here in Toowoomba, and I'd grown up with a lot of people I was around, and having that sort of close-knit community was definitely very helpful in preparation.
And Jo, you also talk about that, the community spirit and family and neighbours dropping everything to step up. I found that so heartwarming in your story to see that happening. The sad thing is, though, does it take a crisis for people to do that, both to offer help but also for us to feel that we can accept the help?
In my case, well, it was a crisis, and because he was so young and I was so involved with the school, where he was at school, and Alex had been at the school for 3 years prior, so I had really strong network at this little school. And it did take the crisis for everyone to wrap their arms around me, basically, or around us as a family. And everyone stepped up within the school and within our neighbourhood with taking Alex to school and doing her hair in the morning, you know, just little things like that that I missed out on doing, right through to David coming home and there'd be a lasagna sitting on the front veranda. Just it did, but I don't see that as a negative as such. I mean, I know that you're saying it's a shame that it took it to... We just didn't need it before, and we weren't crying out or calling out for help. I think now people only have to say, I can't do this, and there is a roster written up, and people are baking, and people are dropping kids, and you know, it's all done through Facebook, and they set up a special account, and it all happens. I just think that it's wonderful that we live in a society that the minute we look to need something, and especially in Toowoomba, the minute we do need something, people come running. It's just fabulous.
It's so heartwarming. And Sue, actually, in your book, you talk about it's a logistical help, but it's actually emotional help as well. And you actually use a psychological example that the best predictor of long-term well-being and happiness is this community connection. And it's really important for our mental health. You talk about harnessing your people power and rallying your troops and so on. So what sort of impact does that have on your mental health if you've got that sense of community?
I think it's incredibly supportive. I was always a person that would, prefer to give help than receive help, and I think a lot of us are like that. We like to go and help others. So to be in that situation, to suddenly go, oh my gosh, I just need, it took a while. I just need to accept it. And people were incredible. I think one of my favourite quotes is, cancer is a team sport. And it really does take a village to, help someone through it. And so it was incredibly reassuring, and it felt like just a cushioning around me of people really going out of their way. And some of my, friendships, I developed newer, stronger friendships out of the experience because I was gobsmacked by the generosity and the kindness of people that would do things like, go out of their way travelling through France to go to Lourdes to get me some holy water to, drink or whatever, and there were just so many examples of people doing that. So the gratitude that I gained out of it was extraordinary.
What's the best thing that people can do for someone who's going through that?
Yeah, so firstly, there's lots of things. I've got a chapter in the book, and my chapters are only 2 pages long, large font, so it doesn't take long. But there's lots of things, and I think the food roster is amazing. And it wasn't just the food that came, and to be honest, I didn't really feel like eating when you're having chemo for 5 months. But, a friend just set up a 5-month roster for food to be delivered to our house every weeknight, and it was not just the food, although the family really do appreciate eating, but it was the connection with the people that brought the food and the generosity and the spirit, and yeah, that was incredible. I think one of the things not to say to people, and I find myself still falling into this trap, is just, what can I do for you? Let me know what you want, and I'll do it. If you give someone an open-ended question like that, they'll just say, oh, no, I'm fine, because you're so busy just trying to exist, you can't really think of what your individual needs are. So I think some people don't like cooking. They might be, come around and walk your dog or wash your dog or, come and just really, just take you for a drive to a beautiful, forest, or just do something, watch a funny movie with you. So I think it's very individual, but everyone can help, and I think it's good to offer something specific.
Oh, that's really good advice, that being specific thing. And there are some tips in your book as well, I know that. But I think you said not too many lasagnas.
Not too many...
Lasagnas?
Oh.
Did I read that? Maybe I read that somewhere
great.
else.
You can freeze it. You can give it for lunch.
I'm going to open up to the floor for questions.
You kind of go off meat a bit when you're having chemo. So it was like, I was just craving vegetarian things. Which,
Reed craved chops. Chops with handles, and Mum actually took a little grill into the children's ward and she cooked chops, and every little cancer kid was going and so Mum was just, and I was running to Woolworths getting more chops, and Mum's cooking chops and we're just handing them around.
That's beautiful. And when I read that in your book, it made me smile, because I say that to my boys too. We call them chops with handles. although one of them's decided he's a vegetarian. I don't know what on earth to cook. I'm going to get questions from the floor in a minute. Just before we did that, I wanted to talk about the idea of higher purpose and whether where you sit on that idea. Alyssa, you've certainly created your good fortune. You've worked towards it. That's obvious. You can see you've set the milestones and you've gone for it. I'm wondering, you must believe that there's higher forces at play, especially with some of the things that have happened to you. And I think of the example of the earthquake in Nepal in 2015. You were in Nepal when it happened. You left your camp after one of the aftershocks, only to find out that 8,000 people had died. And when you decided to go back to your camp, there was your tent completely decimated, and that would have been you had you not decided to step away. So what... Do you believe that there are higher forces at play? Do you believe in a God of some sort?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have considered myself to before I'd started climbing these really big mountains. But yeah, I think when you're in that environment, it's just hard not to believe it. And particularly some of the incidences, to be there for sort of 2 natural disasters and to be okay, you definitely start to question why that happened. And I don't have a definitive answer on that, but definitely sort of felt like we were meant to be, and obviously trying to offer any assistance we could. And then going back to Everest for a 3rd season, there was a lot of umming and ahhing about should we be there, do we want to go back after those 2 seasons, but it felt really good to go back with the Sherpa community and everyone, and the common theme there was, we want to have a positive season on the mountain, and we did. I don't know, I definitely think in some ways it happens for a reason.
You just don't want to keep testing that though, do you? Or do you? I think you do.
Yeah.
Sue, do you believe there's a higher purpose in everything you've been through?
I guess I do. I don't know, I believe in the universe and that things do happen for a reason. But I also believe that if something does happen, trying to find some meaning and purpose in it will really help you. And that's scientifically proven that people will do better if they can find meaning in their crisis or their tragedy. So, but I think, the universe does do things for a reason, so.
What are your thoughts on that, Jo? Can you make any sense of what happened to Reed and your family?
So I've just had a bit of a mental blank because I was ready for this question. What's the name of the fellow that hosts QI?
Stephen.
Yeah.
Stephen
Fry. So he said that if he was to die and he'd end up in front of God, he would look God in the eye and he would say, "Bone cancer in children, what's that about?" My son had bone cancer and he was 5. So what is that about? So that is a question that I ask myself quite regularly, but I still believe that there is a higher purpose. I do believe that there is a reason. I'm very, very grateful that he didn't take my son, whatever that reason was for letting me keep him or letting us still have him in our community. But at the same time, I'm a little bit sceptical because I just don't understand why you would put a child through so much suffering. I mean, take me, don't take our little children. And there were so many beautiful little children who didn't make it. So I question it quite regularly. And then I'm brought back to, well, hang on, we've still got Reed. Maybe it's meant for me. Maybe, blah, blah, blah. It's very hard. So I sort of teeter on the edge. But I do believe that good things do come out of bad things. I am a positive person. I do always look for the silver lining, but that one at that particular time in my life, there was none. He was gone. He was not there.
And now that Reed's a bit older, what is his view on why he went through what he did?
Reed doesn't talk about it a great deal. He hasn't read the book, neither has David for that matter. Neither of them want to read the book. Reed has said recently that he will eventually, but I don't think it's something he really wants to return to. He gets disappointed in the scars and he has a permanent limp, but he has turned that limp into almost a positive because when he runs on the basketball court, people can't work out how he's running, so so he tends to actually trick them a little bit because he's quite fast, but he's He sort of runs a bit with a really different sort of gait. So I'm not really sure. I can't answer that question.
It's a strategic advantage for him, is it? The limp.
I think he's trying to use it as a strategic advantage, yes.
Isn't that wonderful? I wonder where he learnt that from, that positive spin. Does anyone have any questions for our wonderful speakers? And if not, I can go on.
You ladies, that was absolutely brilliant. Am I going to be right? The other day we heard Damian Tomlinson, the fellow who lost both limbs in Afghanistan, and then he went on Survivor and has done all this other stuff. And he was talking about, you know, you never know how you're going to respond when you're faced with adversity. And, you know, it's like that song, you know, I've never had to knock on wood. And I think, like, in your experience, are you proud of how you came out of it? I know you said you wouldn't wish it on your worst friend, but have you surprised yourself?
That's, yes, I have surprised myself, Megan. There was a time when I really didn't think that I would see anything positive out of what I was going through. But the perspective, and it isn't my quote, but it's one that I've stolen. It was Michael Bublé actually said that. And he has just been through a recent, his son has just gone into remission from hepatoblastoma, which is liver cancer. And he has now a completely different view on his life. He doesn't know how many records he's sold. He doesn't know how much money he's got in the bank. But before that, he did. And so now it's more about, well, I just want my children to be healthy, I want my marriage to survive, and want my parents to live until at least 100 because I really need them to hang around for a bit longer. And so my perspective is all about being happy and healthy. And I even sign my books that way and have done for quite a long time. So that is, yes, that's my main goal. And yes, I am very proud of where I am now as opposed to where I was.
Anyone else want to answer that question?
Yeah,
Alyssa?
definitely. You know, like I said, I think you train and prepare for these, you know, very real world environments, but you still have no idea how you're actually going to react when it does happen. And if there was any silver lining, particularly to the first two sort of tragedies that happened, it was that I felt that I had reacted the best way I possibly could given the circumstances.
Do we have any other questions? Then I thought I'd just ask one more quick one, which is that idea of gratitude that you've touched on before. Because I know, Sue, in your book you talk about how that's actually a really helpful strategy and has proven psychological benefits to practice gratitude. So do any of you do that? Do you actively or consciously write gratitude journals or speak about what you're grateful for? And should we be doing that?
Go for it, Sue.
I'm the one with the strategies. No. I knew about gratitude journals and I knew that they were, you know, that people felt better when they did them, but I found it really hard to sit down at night and write 3 things I was grateful for. And when you've got cancer or your child's got cancer or whatever's going, sometimes it's really hard to find a grateful moment in the day. So I would use gratitude in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. And I was like, it was kind of like, you know, taking medicine, really. It was like, I think, all right, I'm awake. What am I grateful for? And I would just pluck things out of the... So it actually would put me to sleep a bit. But I used a best moment journal, and for me that was great. So at the end of each day, I would write down the best moment of the day, and it might have been something really little like lighting a candle and, you know, smelling the fragrance, but it was something. And so what you can tend to do with a best moment journal is when you do them regularly, you look at your best moments, then your days change and you start thinking, oh, this might be my best moment today. So you tend to focus on what's happening and find you savour the best moments in the day a lot more. So for me that was really good, but everyone's different. And I guess my bottom line with the book is I wanted to provide just a smorgasbord of strategies and tools that you could use, and because everyone's different and everyone will find their own recipe. And it might, you know, I ended up, my character strengths, gratitude, just came right up to the top 5. So I gained gratitude, but yeah, everyone's different, but it's a really good one to try and work into your routine.
Jo or Alyssa, do you do it? Do you
So
recommend?
I don't do journals necessarily, but a couple of things. I think having the unique opportunity to travel quite young to third world countries, to go to Papua New Guinea on the Kokoda track, where you're seeing families live in these mud huts and just how different life is. I think very early on that gave me the perspective of then coming back to Australia, going, wow, like we've got a lot. So I think right from the get-go I was quite grateful for that. But then also, getting back from these expeditions, you enjoy really simple things, in your day-to-day life, and I think you're more grateful for that as well.
What's next for you, Alyssa? Can you tell us?
Nothing specific at the moment. I'm actually just guiding some different expeditions, but personally just enjoying some downtime as well.
Emma has a question.
How many sides of Everest?
How many sides are there?
Well, if there's a north and a south, does that mean there's an east and a west?
There is, yes.
Oh, there you go, 2 more.
Yeah. There's lots of ways to keep climbing it, yeah. There's like 18 different routes that you can take, yeah.
I suspect she's not done yet. Thank you to these... Oh, we have a question here.
Just one to Jo. Would you ever consider writing another book of how Alex and Reed and your mum and dad and your family, and just in particular your family, have come out of this? Not now, but, in a year or two, and... I don't know, because that could be
Did
very
you know
good.
it took me 4 years to write the one that I have already written, and it's only a novella?
I know, but I just wondered, because that
Thanks,
would be a
Chris.
big push for a lot of people, I feel.
Yeah. Yes, it's actually, thank you. It's actually a question that has been asked of me a couple of times since we started talking about Unleash the Beast. And I think, and also when Jacinta said this to me on Saturday, that because she didn't know me, she was actually looking for the demise in my marriage, and then actually I was able to share the parts of our marriage that went wrong, and we're still together. I mean, who knows what the next chapter could be for David and Jo Capp. I mean, we're still working on our marriage. I mean, everyone that's married knows that it's not a walk in the park, and it has good days and bad days. And how Reed has gone on to do with the things he's done, and Alex has gone on to actually study social work. So I've actually knocked back the counselling side of things at the very start, and now I have a daughter who's actually studying exactly what I didn't believe in. But I do now. I'm a changed person.
And that's a good question, because as we talked a bit about today, huge impact on families when you go through adversity. And you three are incredible with the way you've dealt with what you've been through, and really generous of you to share your stories both in your books and here today. Thank you so much. And also, this is the last session of Unleash the Beast, so thank you to Emma McTaggart for pulling this off. Woo!